And importantly, in Spring Core module, we are going to learn two topics. Main important topics are how to create objects and how to connect objects. Creation of objects and connecting the objects are the main two key features of Spring. If you understand these two, it will be, you know, so much easy to code with any module. Other modules are having features, something like connecting with the database or to connect with the front end. But the main core features across the Spring that you should understand is how to create any object and how to connect them. Why connection also important is while implementing applications using MVC, we divide logic into multiple classes instead of keeping all the logic controller logic, business logic, DO logic together into a single class. For a clear logic separation, we maintain controllers business DO separately. When there is a request from front end, consider you are doing simple registration name, email address and sending data from here to controller. Controller should able to connect with the business should able to connect with the DAO should connect with the databases. So you should connect them. Before connecting them, you should create objects for them. In Java, when you want to talk from one class to another class, obviously you need an object. If I try to give a simple core Java example, okay, I told you to download Eclipse. I hope you all did that. Okay, so I'll give you a simple core Java example that already you are aware of. First thing, how to create objects, we will see. How to create objects, we will see using Spring. There are two ways. One is XML and one is annotation approach. The annotation approach is the important one, which is being used in real time. In real time, we use it annotations only. Excuse. So let me create a simple core Java example. Okay, I'm just trying to connecting you core Java to Spring. Okay, core Java to Spring. So you will easily able to relate to it. Okay, simple core Java example. If I give here, you can relate your Spring with the core Java features and easily you can understand. Object. Okay, I just created a simple project. I'm creating a package. A simple class I'm writing here. Simple class I'm writing here. And keeping one default constructor to show you while creation of object, in core Java, we mandatorily need a constructor to create an object, right? Either default constructor or parameterized constructor. One constructor is mandatory for any Java class. When somebody hit this with a new keyword, then object will be created for this class. Then only your code will launch into computer. Correct? As soon as you create object for this class, then only this class will load into computer and it will perform the tasks which you mentioned. Let's say here I have public void hello. I wanted to execute this method. Before execution of this method, you need to load this class into computer. How you will load? You need to create an object. Main execute method. Main method. So from main method, always we load this classes. Student is equal to, using new keyword we create object. New, then we call the constructor. See, the call will come here when you create object. Usually what will happen in this line? Your class will load into RAM or JVM. Computer. Load into computer or machine. In other words, internally JVM. Your class load into JVM. Then once it loaded, you can call any functions that you have implemented. Hello is a function or a method that I implemented. I can call it by using this reference. Already it is loaded. So all the loaded functions I can execute. This is how we implement any task in Java, right? We create a class and we will keep our functions inside class. And we execute it once after loading into JV. So object created, thereafter I can able to call my methods. You can have 1 method, 10 methods, 100 methods. Any number of methods you can have in your code. Okay. So this is how I create object in core Java. And one more way in core Java, this is first approach. Approach number 1. Okay. New keyword style. This is new keyword style. Using class.furname also you can create. Core Java only. Class.furname also we can create. Okay. So how? Without a new keyword, class.furname. Here you need to give your class name, fully qualified path, package name dot class name. Then dot, what is that? New instance. One method is there in this class dot furname method, new instance. When you call it, it will create an object, student object. Okay. So one more object created, second object. So using this second object also, you can call your it is asking to handle exception, compile time exception it is throwing. So either you need to apply try catch, sorry, is it for everyone? Is my sharing is okay? Okay, maybe check your internet power then. Throws exception. If you keep throws exception, that error will go away. compile time exceptions you can handle with try catch or apply throws. Okay. So using second style also I can able to create object. Now run it. These all are basic core Java approaches. I don't know if you came across anything else. One more student object created. Hello. End of the day, Spring framework or Struts framework, any framework or any container, any server. When I implement my functions in Java classes, my Java object should create. That should be by a developer or by a container. Someone should create my objects to bring my functions into life. Otherwise, my functions will not work. To work my functions or methods, I need to create object. You do with the new keyword or class.forName, whatever it is. But this is simple core Java approach, and this is not recommended. This is not recommended because when you use core Java approach, lot of code you need to write. When you implement a big application, lot of code you need to write to create objects, to connect objects. Lot of code you need to write manually. And the problem is, for every user request, it will execute and creates brand new objects. If I try to put the same logic again and again, or consider this is a web application, order application. Okay, here I have two orders. Okay, one is order controller and one is delivery controller something. So when you order morning, many people wake up and they are ordering for groceries. 1 lakh request if I get here, 1 lakh times this order and delivery objects will create. So overall 2 lakhs objects it will create into your JVM, and your JVM definitely will go out of memory. It will not function. Instead of that, one object also sufficient. But who will write that algorithm? Creation of one object. We need to have a lot of skills. Instead, we presenting that many skills here. If I use framework, framework will do it for us. All the best practices for enterprise applications, it brought internally. So you need not to write so much algorithm. Just if you use a framework, framework will apply all that for you. So instead of new keyword or instead of class dot for name to create a object, we use what? We use IOC container. We use IOC container. Who will create objects in Spring? IOC container will create objects for us. Okay. So to create IOC objects, I give an example, right? So first create any class which you want, like student class which we created now, and configure your class into XML file. Next step, and load that class into load that XML file. Once after configuring your class into XML, load it into IOC container. Container will take care of your objects creation. How many containers we have? A bean factory, application context, two types. Lazy container, eager container. This is lazy, a lazy container, and this is eager container. It will do early objects creation. It will do lazy objects creation. Okay. So in real time, we use this application context to type only, not lazy type. I'll tell you. Okay. Already we have done one example how to create objects using container. So this is core Java style to create object. You understand, right? Why I need object to execute my functions? I need object. Always you demand for a object when you want to execute for a function. If someone asks you to execute a method, you ask where is the object. So object is mandatory. Without creating object, you can't run your functions. Object is mandatory. Then only I can run my methods. So now Spring saying use my framework. Okay, I'll use. Do you create objects? Yes. Spring will create objects for you. So this is the example where I have the student class, student object created here, and this is my hello function. Hello. Everyone, good morning is my hello function. What I did next step, I created a class. In next step, we created a XML file, Spring XML file. Main important tag is bin tag. Here you can configure all your classes. One application means many classes. So you can configure all that classes here. Bean ID, put any unique ID here and your class name, complete class name, beans.student. Right. What next? I created my class with one function and I configured my class in XML file. Next thing is you need to load it into container. So this is the bean factory container. What I named it? Lazy container. So I loaded my XML file into lazy container. Bean factory reference is equal to new XML bean factory, new class path resource. What I'm doing here, using new class path resource, from my class path I'm reading this XML file. Why I need this XML file? Because all my beans I am configuring here. So obviously to create these objects I need this XML. So that's why I am loading my XML here. From your class path it will read and it will give that XML file to XML bean factory. Don't treat it as a simple class. It's not a simple class. It is a IOC container class. It is a container class. It is the container who is creating your objects. A powerful class, but a lazy class. Until unless you ask for an object, it will not create anything. Otherwise, see when I execute it, debug mode I'm running until line number 12. Observe, and line number 14 also you observe during execution. So my cursor is on line number 12, means it is ready to execute my IOC. Okay, finish it. So line number 12 is executed and waiting cursor at line number 14. So after line number 12, is there any object created here? No. Is there any function executed? No. Just printing one log for j, warning, no appenders could be found, logger. It is saying there is no loggers configured. And please initialize log4j system properly. Okay, take it. But no execution happened. Just it was readed your file. That's it. Nothing happened yet. But when I call bean factory, when I ask my IOC container, this is IOC container. When I ask my IOC container, get the bean, then it will realize, okay, he needs an object, let me create it. Execute this. Line number 14 is executed. Now see, student object is created. Here it is created. Then you can execute your function. Object is ready. Either you create with new keyword or get it from IOC. The best way is use IOC. Don't create any objects yourself. Always create all your application objects using IOC only. That is the best way. So get the object and execute your function. So my hello function executed. Hello everyone, good morning. One more user also needs same object. Okay, let him get. He will ask factory.getB. So for him also it returned one student object. But if you see in the background, no other object created. Same object returned to you. So when second user also executed hello method, it is executing hello. Means if you consider this hello function is like a orders, Swiggy orders. Daily lakhs people will place the orders, but only one order object will be created. What is the benefit? One object only will be loaded into your JVM. So it will occupy memory for one object only. If it is core Java approach, for 1 million users, if you create objects using new keyword, 1 million objects it will create into JVM. That is really unnecessary. not required. One object is bus enough. So IOC is doing it for you. IOC doing that favor to you. It is making it singleton by default. Your object is singleton by default. Your object is singleton by default, but bean factory is a lazy one, right? It is creating object at first time user request. First time early in the morning, 5 o'clock, one person wake up after Swiggy application deployment. He placed the order. Then it immediately created order object. Same order object it will use for all other orders next. Today, tomorrow, and until your application down, same objects it will be consumed. So what is the benefit? It will occupy very less memory into the RAM so that your application will not heat up, or you will be having enough memory to execute your functions. Correct? So only one object creating here. At the time of request only, when you request for it, then only it is creating. So like this, you create any number of objects. They are all same. To compare this object and this object, use system.out.println and try to check with equal. Double equal will check whether these two objects are same or not. Both hash, it will check. Now if I verify student object and student 2 object which is written same, yes, true. It is saying true. Both are same. This one and this one are same, not different. But if you use core Java approach or class.forName approach, whatever you do, if you try to compare them, every time it will create a brand new object. Student is equal to student 2. Same means no. Every time. Every time it will create brand new object. So false. You can see student object created first time and second time. So in core Java the problem is as many times as you create object it will create it into the RAM. It will occupy a lot of memory. Whereas Spring Container will create only one object for you at first time request because it is bean factory, lazy container. This lazy one will create object at first user request only. Lazy container at first request only. Not every time, but at first request. Until then it will sleep. If you don't wake up, it will sleep. Nothing. Sleep means it just wait when you request, then only it will create. But in this place, if I use one more IOC container J2EE, J2EE container if I use early container, which one? Application context. Application context, application context equal to new class path XML application context. So here you load your XML file. That's it. Now use this application context and get beans. So add a debugger. Debug as Java application and see carefully. I'm executing line number 11. This one. Execute it. Line number 11 executed and you see student object also created. Earlier for bean factory only log warnings came. But for application context, your objects also create. Immediately, fatafat it will create your object as soon as you load your XML. Okay. Now when you request for bean, same bean it will return. At this line number 13 it will not do anything, just it will return you whichever object is already created. So if you see after line number 13 execution, no special output because this object is already created, same object it will return to you. Hello everyone, good morning. Again I am calling, so it will not create any object, just it will return it. So no special output. Second object also hello function. So two hello functions executed with the student object, which is created very beginning while loading your XML file into application context itself. So that's why it is early container. During loading of your XML file itself, object created here, but that is not the case with bean factory, right? And when you compare these two objects are same. So application context is creating object during loading time itself. What is loading time means? In real time, when this XML file loaded here or when this XML file loaded here in real time means when you start your server. When you start your servers, this statements will execute. In real time, imagine this line number 11 will execute when you start your server. In real time, imagine these lines will execute when you start your servers. Once you do application, when you place it into your server and start it, your XML files will be loaded into IOC containers in real time. Just imagine it. Okay, later you will realize it. So up to that line number 11 here or in that bean factory, this IOC containers will start when you start your servers. So which approach you think the object creation is the best way? Creating lazily or creating eagerly or early? Application context creating objects here. Bean factor creating objects when user requested. Until then it is not doing anything. So in my opinion, it is always good to create objects at the time of server startup itself, because during after development we do testing in our local, then we give it to tester also, then we will give it to production. Actual end users will use in production. When you deploy your application in production and start it, it is always best way to create all your objects and connect all your objects, so that if there are any errors, it will populate errors immediately during deployment time only. As developers only will do that deployment, developers will be part of it. If there are any errors, we can realize immediately and we can fix that problems. But if it is a lazy object creation, we deploy and we go to home, tomorrow morning end users will start using it. Then if they face any problems here, if they face any problems here while creation of objects, then that will be very bad. They will report issues, then we should join, we should check the logs and we should fix the problems. So always testing our product, or always during deployment time itself, if we prepare everything readily for end user, it is good, right? Instead of when user requested, slowly if it is creating objects, let's say for this object creation, if it needs some time, first user need to wait in the queue for long time, he frustrated. Instead of that, it is always good to create objects during loading time itself. So I started server, I prepared application, I deployed into my server, it is started, it is created all the objects. Then I verified log, everything looks fine. Server started in so and so port number, message given, then I can relax. Because all my objects created, everything is ready. From my application side, all objects it is created because it is early container. As soon as users request, safely it will give that object so that they can execute their functions. So I'll be having less risk here if I go with this approach. And this is only we are using in real time. Okay, don't worry about bean fact. That is lazy container, and that is very base container. While designing this framework, they started creating that class, and later they realized advanced features we need to provide. They provided advanced features from application context only. So we use application context only in real time, though we have bean factory. This is the base container. From this container only, features extended to application context, and they made some adjustments to them and added new features in application context. So what is their job? First job, they will create objects. They will create objects. Why they need to create objects? I also can create object new keyword, but if you use new keyword, what is happening? What is happening? You are creating so many objects, prototype of objects. Many objects you are creating, whereas I was creating only one singleton object. That is the advantage. So one approach is creation of objects using XML file. I am configuring my classes into XML file. There is another approach also to create objects. There is another approach also. Instead of configuring it into XML file, there are some annotations. Okay, I'm going to show you new style. Generally, as I told you, right, we follow pure MVC architecture while creation of these classes. So if your class is, I have a front end form, registration form, a front end view I have here. For this view, how many classes I need to write? One controller, registration controller, registration service, registration DAO. Usually we break up it into three layers: controller, business, DAO, controller, business, DAO, front end, controller, business, DAO. So this is how the flow happens. View will send it to controller, controller will send it to service, service will send it to DAO. So for this use case, if I start creating these classes, in case of annotation approach, if it is a simple XML approach, you will take all these classes into XML file and you configure them. In your XML file, you configure everything. In this XML file, you configure your controller. Here your registration controller bean or your registration service bean you configure here, or your registration DAO bean. All your beans you configure here, then you load it into application context. That is the story that we did. We created a student bean and we loaded. But in annotations, you need not to configure them. In annotations approach, you need not to configure your beans here. Then instead you configuring with this, you can use simple annotations. Are you writing controller? Yes. Use a controller annotation. I'll give you in depth about each and every annotation later, okay? But just understand this annotation's purpose only. Simple purpose. Controller or REST controller given. Or here for service, you can use @service annotation on top of your class. On top of DO class @repository, you can use. These are the main three important annotations: controllers, service, repository. And there are two more annotations also. If you have any validations class, registration form validation, some extra utility classes, we call them utility. So when you have such utility classes, you can use @component. Sometimes we create third-party libraries. While working on third-party libraries, we configure them to our application. Something configuration classes also we write. So when you write configuration classes, we use configuration annotation. Some third-party libraries we use here. Third party, apart from Spring. Already you are using Spring. Apart from Spring, you want to integrate with some third-party libraries, some Apache library or some Kafka library, some external libraries I want to configure to my application. So at the rate configuration annotation also I'll use. So what I'm just trying to say, while you are implementing your Spring application, plain you can write plain classes, plain controller, plain validation class, service class, DO class, and configuration class, and you can write logics. But imagine for one form you returned almost three classes or four classes. Configuration may be one-time effort. One-time configuration may be useful for all the forms. One-time connection to Kafka. But for registration form, you returned registration controller, service DAO, and one validation class. All these four classes you need to configure it in XML file. Imagine many developers are working on same application and on daily basis so many classes you are implementing. Hundreds, thousands, it become thousands. So all that thousands of classes you need to configure here. So your XML file going forward, it will become very large. All configurations will be done inside XML file. And sometimes there is a chance that as many developers are working, there is a chance that your configurations may lost by other developer may interrupt or change your configurations. That will create lot of disturbances in your application. While many people working, definitely that will happen. So much confusion will happen. So many configurations you need to do here. So what is Spring saying? While using annotations, no configurations required. You are implementing Pawan implementing a use case. Okay, Pawan, keep these annotations on top of your class. Sukanya implementing one use case. Okay, just keep the stereotypes on top of your class. Bus. You need not to go until XML file and configure them. Instead, IOC will come to you. Earlier, we used to go to XML file and configure them. Now, IOC will do what? In reverse way, it will come to your classes. When you start your application, it will perform scanning of your packages. It will come all the way to your classes. It will scan them and it will create objects. It will scan your classes and it will create objects. You need not to create or you need not to configure them into XML file. Is it good or not? Yes, I can avoid all the XML configurations. So particularly these annotations are available. Component, controller, REST controller, service, repository, configuration. In detailed about these annotations we will see while exploring framework, right, in detail. But the main purpose of these annotations is creating objects of your classes without touching XML file. Creation of your objects without touching XML file. We call these annotations as stereotypes. Stereotypes annotations. They categorized two annotations are for controller, service annotation is for business class, repository is for DAO class, component is for any utility classes, any miscellaneous classes if you have. Configuration is for purely configuration classes. So overall, five types of annotations: controller annotation, service, repository, component, configuration. All these are stereotypes. The use of stereotypes, creating object only without going to XML. Simple. I'm giving you one more example. This is the advanced level, okay? This is the advanced level Spring IOC with the stereotypes. Create a project, go to build path, add external jars to your class path, bus, apply and close. creating beans package, or let me create few packages. Controllers, I'll create all dummy classes. I'm keeping one web package and real-time standard naming conventions only I've used. Okay. Generally we put com, then company name dot application name, com dot arbutor student management system. Okay. Then package name, web package, com dot organization name dot application name dot for controllers web package or rest package. If you want to know naming conventions, I'll explain later. Okay. And business package or service, and one DO package. If you have any extra classes, utilities, we generally in real time we configure them into util package and configurations into config package. Generally, these many types of classes we will have. Controller to read data from front end, to execute business logic service, to execute database logic DAO, to connect with other systems configuration. For miscellaneous validations kind of stuff, util classes. Now I'll write all dummy classes just to show you registration controller, how objects are creating automatically. To understand object whether creating or not, put a statement in default constructor so that we can observe default controller object. So if it is a controller, as I told you, you need to use at the rate controller annotation or rest controller. We'll see rest controller later. Controller annotation on top of your controller class. Then service. Writing a service class at the rate service annotation on top of it. Override default constructor service object. Next, DAO registration DAO. If it is a DAO, you need to use at the rate repository annotation. Remember these annotations. As you are learning Spring, hardly okay, cool. Okay. So registration DAO. Hardly you need to remember few more annotations apart from this. Throughout your Spring journey, these annotations only you will use. Controller annotation, service, repository, component, configuration. Okay. Controller class created with controller annotation. Service class created with service annotation. DO class created with repository annotation. What next? If you have any utility class, some validation class. On top of them, you need to put at the rate component. Registration validation object. What else? Oh, it need to be there in utils package. Okay. Here configuration class registration or something. DB configuration class at the rate configuration. So now all 5 annotations configured here. Controller, service, repository, component, and configuration. Bus. Now all these classes I need not to configure in XML file. Instead, I can simply scan them. Instead, I can simply scan them. So I need XML file, create XML file here, put any name, spring.xml. So in this XML file, you need to scan these classes. To scan these classes, you need to configure component scan. Context colon component scan base package. What is the base package of all your classes? IOC will go and collect all the classes from these packages. So base package means what is the root package for them. com.rbu.sms is the root package. So just you need to give that path here, com.rbu.sms. That you can use star if you want. That's it. Earlier I configured bean here using @bean tag. If you are not using annotations, then obviously you need to configure all your classes here. All your web classes, service classes, DO classes, all that stuff. If you have 1000 classes, 1000 XML configurations you need to do here. Now, nothing. Just asking to scan them. Asking IOC to scan them. Go to these packages and click that objects. Pick that object and create them. When it will create objects for them, when you configure with the stereotypes only. If you try to put some dummy classes without the annotations, it doesn't take care of them. Just the annotations which you have, only that classes objects only, it will be created. Now load it into same container and see. Application context, new class path, XML application context, resources slash spring.xml. Just loading my XML file at line number 10. Observe it. I'm running this. See how many objects created. Config object, DO object, service object, validation object, controller object, fatafat it created them. But you did not even configure them into your XML. So for developer, it given so much rest. You take rest. IOC will take care of you. Right? Just imagine when you implement a big application with so many classes, you need not to go to XML and configure them. Don't worry. As IOC, I'll take care. I'll go to your packages and I'll scan them and I'll create objects for you. But what you need to do your job while writing your controllers, don't forget to put @controller annotation. While writing your business class, don't forget to keep service annotation. And while writing DAOs, don't forget to put the repository. If it is a utility class, don't forget to use component annotation. If it is a configuration class, don't forget to use configuration annotation. But write your classes first. You don't do anything apart from. Based on this package, I'll visit your packages and I'll scan your classes and I'll create objects. Usually, this will not change. Root will not change. Com dot company name dot application name. Bus. Inside that packages only any developer will write his classes. So developers need not to visit to XML and configure his classes. So only thing they need to do is they should just focus on their classes only. No extra configuration. Clear? Sorry? We required. We required this XML file. Yeah. See, we are not yet in web application. Don't imagine too much, okay? Just understand the scope. When we go to web application, configuration styles will change, okay? When we go to Spring Boot, the style configuration will change. That's it. Otherwise, the main core principle of this Spring will not change, okay? I'll tell you when we go to web application, how do we configure it? When we go to Spring Boot, how do we configure it, okay? Yeah. But it is very clear, right? How we are doing in XML file and without XML file.